Hi, everyone. I would like to welcome you all to this very pertinent discussion today on Impact Conversations with Aavishkaar Group. This episode is being organized in collaboration with the Nudge Foundation and SOCAP Global. I'm Soumya Suryanarayanan. I lead Impact in ESG at Aavishkaar Capital. To give you a very quick introduction to Aavishkaar Group, we started in 2001 with an aim to solve complex social problems by really harnessing the entrepreneurial energy. Our vision is to bridge the opportunity gap for the emerging 3 billion. Earlier this year, the group released its first Impact Report 2020 that featured stories of 12 powerful women from across the group who shared their journey with us. And the Impact Conversations started as a tribute to them and the 55 million women who helped shape the Aavishkaar Group impact journey. Through these conversations, we wanted to bring together leaders, social entrepreneurs, investors, and other stakeholders in the impact community to share some of the best practices, collaborate, and take action to create more inclusive and sustainable world. Today, we are excited to host this panel discussion focused on technology for building resilient ecosystems and discuss the importance of collaboration in current times to help entrepreneurs deliver impact. Please join me in welcoming four incredible leaders with diverse experience in creating collaborative ecosystems and building successful impact enterprises in Asia and Africa. We have with us Jayesh Bhatia, Managing Director in Telecap, has close to 3 decades of experience in the natural resources management and the rural development sector. He established and scaled Natural Resource Management Consultants India as a leading development support organization working extensively in the rural and social development sector in India. Welcome, Jayesh. Sudha Srinivasan is the CEO of the Nudge Center for Social Innovation and leads ENCODE and related initiatives to attract and develop top talent working on problems of poverty. She started her career in the technology sector and spent close to 2 decades in various leadership roles. Welcome, Sudha. Emily Woods believes simple engineering solutions can change the world. As a co-founder and COO, she's responsible for Sanivation's innovative technology designs and delivery of sanitation services across East Africa. Welcome, Emily. And we have Ankit Arora, who's the founder and CEO of Sarthi Education. He has a decade-long experience in the education sector, especially working in the low-income communities across the country. Welcome, Ankit.
Thanks. Thank you, Soumya.
So with this, I would like to hand it over to Jayesh to take the discussion forward today.
Thank you, Soumya. I am advised that we are really joined by participants and collaborators across 3 continents, the Americas, the Africa, and Asia, India in particular. So I would just say a very warm good morning to people from Americas, a good afternoon to people in Africa, and good evening to all of us who are here in India and Asia. It's just a privilege with such a stellar panel over this particular conversation. And when I was sitting down this morning, really to look at on what is it that I could potentially say, and I've got really going back 30 years to when I started professionally in the development sector. And one of the key differentiators between now and then was that I was engaged with one project in one sector in a bunch of about 120 villages. 30 years and still learning, and some working across about 20,000 odd villages in India and South Asia. I think one thing that we do all, and I'm sure all of us would agree, that we do not have that similar approach now. We are really looking at a multi-sectoral, multi-pronged approach to fight poverty. We all, I think, are geared towards really eliminating poverty by 2030. At the Aavishkaar Group, as Soumya just mentioned, the whole approach over the last 20 years, 25 years, really has been on addressing the opportunity gap for bottom 3 billion population. And as part of that whole endeavor, there are three key aspects that has shaped and defined our work, and including my work at NRMC. It's been what interplay that we could potentially see across institutions, technology, and finance on how do we address this whole, pretty entrenched poverty, and how do we really bring people out of that poverty to make this world a more resilient place. I think in terms of the natural resources sector and the social development sector, as Soumya alluded to, that I've been engaged over the last 30 years, technology really has played a phenomenal role, particularly over the last 7 or 8 years, where, right from identification and initiation of the project, really scale up of the initiatives and the potential impact that a project or the initiative could have has been just phenomenal. Right from basic communication to hitherto unreached areas in the hills and hinterlands of India, to really looking at the data in real time and what we could potentially do to ameliorate and work towards meeting the objectives of the money that has been given to us to be responsibly invested. There have been many challenges that we've looked at, but it's pretty humbling to see how best this interplay of institutions, technology, and finance has really given us the confidence to say that we would be able to contribute to this global agenda of ending poverty by 2030. As part of the Aavishkaar group, as Soumya introduced, I'm the managing director at Intellicap. We do look at this whole triangle of institutions, finance, and technology to really look at across various ecosystems of what we can contribute to. We do look at enterprises, we do look at public systems, and how do they really emerge in terms of addressing and taking us forward to this goal. Over the last 15 months, all of us have been witness to, I think, one of the most ravaging pandemics that we've seen in living history. And again, as part of this whole global response to this pandemic has been driven largely by technology and collaborations around the vaccine development and deployment. As we look forward over the next 8 or 9 years, looking up some data this morning as part of our work, I was reminded that this pandemic really has taken at least India back on some of the key development indicators by about 10 years. So when we were before this pandemic about 15 months ago, we were already challenged to look at addressing and ending poverty by 2030. We really need to be looking at repurposing our mission and goals to ensure that we still meet up that particular goal over the next 8 to 10 years. Both on a personal and professional level, I'm sure each one of us participating today and beyond have been impacted directly or indirectly by this pandemic. And we can just really tighten our belts and go back, as I said earlier, to repurpose our own missions and our organizational goals to ensure that we are back on this path of resilient growth at the soonest possible. Today, my friends, we've been really joined by these three outstanding individuals, Sudha, Emily, and Ankit, who've shown in their respective fields how technology can be deployed, how institutions can be strengthened, and how do we address intractable problems of reaching the unreached over the last so many years. As we look at the next 35-40 minutes, we would, however, briefly really address and look to these individuals sharing with us their journey before the pandemic and how the technology, of course, was influencing the work that they do, each one of them, but how they have repurposed themselves or are repurposing themselves as we look forward to the next 9 years to ensure that we all live in a resilient world that we all aspire to do. So I'll request Sudha, who's leading the Nudge Foundation. I've had the privilege in the earlier era, pre-pandemic, to have met her personally at this India Land and Development Conference, and we're very impressed with the kind of work that Nudge Foundation is doing. And I'd welcome you, Sudha, to come in and share your journey, pre-pandemic and post-pandemic.
Sure. Thank you so much, Jayesh, and very nice to see you again. As you are aware, we started our work as an incubator for non-profit startups. It was an uncommon thing to do, to incubate tech startups in a non-profit model back in 2017. And I'm glad it doesn't surprise people as much as it used to before that we do such a thing. The belief fundamentally was that problem solving at scale is just so much easier if you leverage all the tools at your disposal. And technology indeed is a powerful tool. Pre-pandemic, I think it was very category building work in terms of making the sector itself aspirational for top talent, the non-profit sector aspirational for top talent, because there really wasn't visibility to a lot of early seed stage funding at the time. If you compare non-profit ecosystems with the social enterprise impact world, the continuum of funding that goes all the way from being bootstrapped to having scale-up capital, right, to have angels and series ABC funding come in, preparing you for scale, is kind of absent in the non-profit world, where most grant making is programmatic, right? And innovation capital in the early stages is largely absent. Post-pandemic, I think the big realization is that this kind of innovation is needed far more than ever before. That it's an unprecedented time, like you said, that has set us back 10 years in our whole journey in poverty alleviation. The size of problems has kind of grown several fold, and the amount of resources available to address this need is minuscule. How do you kind of bridge this 100x gap? It has to come through the leverage of technology and core foundational innovations that drive systems change and resilience in public systems. So the talent is coming in, waking up to the need. I think it's become very attractive to top talent who are looking for that challenge. But we need to fix the ecosystem in time, make it possible for them to pursue ambitious goals.
That's absolutely critical, and I'm glad that you do really look at not only from a all three pillars, not only just from a private sector, but also absolutely critical the third sector of civil society, but also as you said, to make the public systems more resilient. So from a perspective, as we do look, can you really elaborate a bit on what are these key factors that you're really looking at to address this the 100x requirement that there is? What could others learn from you?
Right. So as an incubator and an accelerator, so we also have an accelerator program that gives out grants up to 2 crores and helps organizations become scale ready. I think our fundamental inputs are in helping founders achieve strategic clarity. They've all set out on very audacious missions. So it's important not just to know what to achieve, but also how to. And the various kinds of collaborations that need to come into play to enable problem solving at scale. Right? So the strategic clarity through mentoring by some of India's most admired change leaders is an important input. The grant itself is pretty significant. At an early stage when most nonprofits are restricted by regulatory norms in accessing institutional funding. Right? Most nonprofits are in the friends and family bootstrap mode for 3 years before eligibility for foreign grants or corporate grants kicks in. So as an incubator or an accelerator, infusing that seed stage capital is an important input. The third thing is to kind of open doors to the large ecosystem of downstream donors. It's a pretty rigorous process we run to find the best and brightest, most capable founders, most committed founders to the cause through a selection process that is pretty detailed. Right? So we're seen as a curator of talent, as well as curator of models that are built for scale. So the whole journey kind of opens opportunities downstream to continue to raise grants and build a support spiral that becomes a tailwind for the ambitious goals that founders set upon. So it's kind of the gap we fill in the ecosystem.
Indeed, indeed. I think in terms of specifically when we do talk about the recent changes in the Indian policy as far as the not-for-profits are concerned, I think in terms that itself is a really critical gap that seems to be emerging. I've seen personally from my own experience, I think since the early 2000s to now, the quantum of grants that are available for the civil society have traditionally moved to more impact, impact money or impact investment, and this whole critical sector within the society, it's been left kind of struggling to get the finances. But of course, from a perspective that we do when you do talk about the not-for-profit sector, it's also, as you said, a lot of people come with a lot of passion, love for the sector and wanting to make those change, but absolutely critical in terms of how they are curated and nudged to be in the sector and be focused on what would work and what would not work. So yeah, I mean, absolutely brilliant. And what are the in this whole last 15 months to reaching out, because as I said, the whole objective has moved in and a lot of people have repurposed themselves in terms of addressing the now and here after the pandemic. How have you managed to really get your cohorts to be focused on what they need to do?
So it's quite a mix of how our cohorts have responded to the crisis. Several have paused their main work and kind of taken on the role of relief organizations addressing the immediate priorities on the ground. But in doing so, have leveraged their core strengths. Right? For example, Dakshas in Hyderabad were a marketplace to repurpose spare capacity in hospitals for surgeries for the underprivileged. They could very quickly pivot and make that a marketplace for discovery of relief in the first phase of the pandemic, and now for oxygen concentrators and ventilators, whatever be the need on the ground. We have Samina Banu and Right Work Foundation, whose core work is to make quality education accessible to everyone through the right to education policies of the government. But they have quickly pivoted and made themselves useful in this very critical time, leveraging the strong relationships and trust that they have with communities on ground, and kind of made sure that the shock of the pandemic does not result in a downward spiral in terms of basic health needs. So that's one kind of responses where you're actually pivoting to focus on the immediate. I'm also very excited about some others that have not wasted a good crisis. Organizations that have pulled in 5 years of work into these past 18 months in terms of accelerating, leveraging the fact that there is a lot of political will, intent now to do things that were otherwise on the back burner and progressing on their own pace. Publicly, particularly as it comes to improvement of public systems, like digital education, fueling, access to digital literacy, and technology-based delivery of educational content in the public school systems, and that has happened across multiple states.
Yes.
Improving public healthcare systems, which is just such a big ask today.
Truly.
Right, and building the robustness and resilience of those systems. So it's kind of been a wide range, but all very, very powerful work.
Yeah,
in the
that gives us hope in terms of, yes, we can and we will,
Absolutely.
get out of this. At this point, I'll shift to Emily, and I see a very beaming Emily the other side of the continent, and just phenomenal what you've been able to do in the sanitation space over this short period that you've been co-founder of Sanivation. So, a similar question to you, Emily, in terms of how what was your mission and vision before the pandemic, and I don't know how badly you are hit, but and how do you see repurposing yourself to 2030 from here on?
Yeah, no, it's a question I think we've all been thinking about a lot over the past year. So for those who don't know, I'm based in Kenya, and COVID here is a little bit different from what the news says for what we're seeing there in India. While less of a direct impact as far as number of cases or number of deaths.
We are losing you, Emily. You need to speak a bit louder, please.
Can you hear me now?
Yes. You need to get it
Great.
close.
Sorry about that. Is that better?
Yes.
Great. I was saying that the impact here in Kenya has more been in Kenya's relation in the international community. And so while COVID hasn't necessarily hit that bad here in Kenya, given different perspectives, our international economy, so for social enterprise, we're still very much dependent on international funders, be they DFIs, be that investors, grants, whatever it might be. And with COVID, all of that slowed down. The whole international economy has slowed down. And so it's been a very interesting past year and a half of a lot of movement, a lot of excitement, and then suddenly just this delay, this long delay that's had to move a lot of things around. And to your point, Sudha, I think a lot of startups, we've gotten really creative. What can we do, during this pandemic? And so Sanivation did just what you're talking about we take our core strengths. What do we know really well? Well, we know a lot about business models and how to cut costs to be able to hit margins. So we've been working with our utilities as partners to, okay, let's work with you on your business model. What can we do to help you get through this time as well? We've taken some of our strengths. Normally we're focused on the back end of sanitation, but we've been also helping now with hygiene, hand washing stations, building toilets, getting the word out, that trust that we have in the community of just trying to, what's the most that we can do right now that's needed in our community. And so it's been an interesting past year. And I think what's hard for startups is now when we talk to our investors, our board, is they worry that we've lost our strategic focus. And so I think it's an interesting balance for startups of how do you still stay strategic focus, but yet this temporary blip of that's very important, and also just making do with what you can.
Yeah, absolutely. I think critical is not to stop and kind of plod on and ensure that we are there somewhere, making that difference that we all would like to do. In terms of very interesting model I was reading about Sanivation, at some level, at NRMC, we've been engaged over the last 10 years with sanitation at scale. We've been engaged on some of the projects that we've managed and worked with Government of India supporting as you possibly know, in world's largest sanitation campaign that India runs. And of course, the challenges are humongous, in terms of the numbers. One of the aspects that we always really looked at as part of this whole campaign was, the lack of technology. We're still pretty, addressing this whole gap of ensuring open defecation-free India with what best that we can do. But of course, there is a need to really come in with the technology. I mean, something like fecal and sludge management. So a little bit of elaboration, how did you look at deploying this particular technology and what the challenges were for you?
Yeah, technology is an interesting piece of our company because I think my perspective to technology has changed a lot in our company's lifetime. I'm an engineering background. My co-founder was engineering. The technology that we now have patents for that convert human waste into reusable solid fuel were key to our company and started in research many years ago. And, you know, when we first developed a prototype of this technology, it was actually down in Chile. And we had this very, very basic prototype there that was, you know, maybe a couple $100, and we could provide effective treatment of human waste for 100 people. And here we were, you know, I guess we were like 23 at the time. We're like, that's it. We solved the sanitation crisis. It's done. It's over. And from an engineering perspective, that is it. And I think the biggest journey I've had is the past 10 years is that innovation oftentimes is not only technology. It's how you then take that technology and apply it in the right, you know, political stance and policy, apply it in the right business models, apply it right in social infrastructure and institutional frameworks that actually allow the technology to exist as one small piece of a much bigger solution. And so while I think technology is important, I think the biggest lesson I've had to learn in my entrepreneur career is that it's not the only solution and it can't stand alone. And so that I think has been a big, big learning for me.
I'm sure, you know, as you know, world over, and particularly in the areas that you work, it's also the social norms that really make it, you know, what messaging that you need to deploy that same technology, and how do you tweak that to meet up with, which is absolutely you know, critical, and you know, also bears with our work here in India at some scale that we've engaged on sanitation. So from sanitation, if we move to Ankit, I mean, again, I think education, the way that I understand the importance of education, I think that's one sector that could really take a family out of poverty in one generation. And the kind of work that you're doing is just phenomenal. And especially if we do look at from a quality of the education that we've always been criticized for, and are very critical, self-critical as well. That engagement of parents as part of this whole journey of the student is absolutely critical. How did you arrive at this whole model that you are now kind of trying to scale up?
I think, so I think, as you said, it's one of the key levers which actually has the promise of lifting out a family out of poverty. And I think it's been very close to our hearts that yes, this can be done. And I mean, like, you know, we keep on talking about the problems of the education sector from a very sectoral point of view, from the public versus private point of view. I think when we started working and COVID gave us like a little bit of time to step back and ask, okay, if I were to ask from a child's point of view, what are some of the major problems that a child faces inside the classroom? And then can we use technology, not technology, community to solve for that? And I think a couple of problems which came out to us was that one, children are not being taught at the right level and at the right pace. So I might be at addition today, but my teacher is teaching me at subtraction. So that's where, you know, you're at a different level. And the problem in Indian classrooms is that a teacher is not evaluated on the basis of what outcomes the children show at end of the year, but if you were able to complete your syllabus at end of the year, whether it's private school or public school. So what that leads to is that if a teacher has allocated 3 weeks for addition, she will move to subtraction on the 4th week, no matter what, whether 20% of the class is learned or 80% of the class is learned. And a lot of people, you know, like I might be at a different level and I might be at a different pace of learning as well. So you maybe say, you know, Jayesh, you and I both started addition today. You might be able to master the skill in 2 weeks, but it might take me 4 weeks, whatever happens at my house. I have to help my mother with chores and etc. So I think that was missing from a child's point of view. And we were like, okay, we have to start at the child's right level and we have to start at the right pace. We have to give that opportunity to the child to engage with the content. And the second problem is that I think, again, in Indian classroom, the feedback loop isn't closed with the children at a much quicker level. So it's only at the end of 6 months or only at the end of 1 year that a mother gets to know that your child has failed, or the teacher tells the child, okay, you have not been progressing. And I think that's gross injustice to any child if you're wasting her 6 months and telling her after 6 months that you haven't progressed. So I think that was another thing for us, that, you know, we have to catch the child on the 2nd or the 3rd or at max at end of the week and tell the child, hey, you have not been progressing. You are an at-risk child and let me give everything I can to make sure you are progressing in the next week. And I think that's where technology also came in handy. So before pandemic, we were running a program where it would take me around 35 to 45 days to analyze whether the child learned or did not learn, progressed or did not progress in the last, because that was the cycle. We were sending out activity content, activity boxes to the community. By the time they would come back to the content team or the M&E team, it will be a normal gap of 35 to 45 days. And then you would realize, okay, we wasted the last 45 days. And there's nothing more disheartening than that. So I think, but with the pandemic, we realized, okay, now we have the power of actually asking the parent, actually blackmailing the parent that you have to send me your worksheet by end of today. Otherwise, you don't get anything tomorrow. And I think that really helped us, because by end of the day, I would know whether this child has mastered this particular skill or not. Of course, a lot of effort went into redesigning the content, figuring out on a incremental pedagogy, figuring out Kumon Khan Academy. But it came down to the fact that I could now by end of day tell, okay, if I send out the worksheet to 8,000 people in the morning, how many of them have responded? 7,500, 7,000, whatever that number is. And focus on that. Can I increase the engagement over the next few weeks? And also figure out that people who are responding, are they progressing as well? Are they showing mastery? And if a child is not showing me mastery for 2-3 days, she gets flagged, and then we can reach out to her, hey, your child has not been progressing. So let's work. Let's figure out a different way. Let's send you a different content. Let's do a more baseline, one more round of baseline, and so on and so forth. So I think, so just identifying that problem, and then technology just was, I don't want to say that this was a good time for us, like the COVID thing, but it actually created those conditions for the parents, for us. It kind of forced us to, hey, we have to go out. Then there were a lot of innovations in tech that we had to do.
I wish you were around when I was young. I would have been a better educated man than I am today. But I mean, jokes apart, in terms of this whole one of the aspects that we do look at is the accessibility of a smartphone at each household. A lot of population at that strata that you're trying to address do still really have feature phones. Correct me if I'm wrong. And how have you bridged that gap? To reach out to the population that you reach out to in Uttarakhand and Delhi and other parts.
Right. And I think for this question, I would like to take on from where Emily left, and what she mentioned, like a very important point, that once you have a tech solution, that's not the end. Because when we actually took it to the ground, we realized, and like a lot of people were coming up with tech solutions for our children in the communities. And the problem was that one, like the device is not available for the whole day. The father takes away the mobile. So you have the mobile at home at a very specific aspect of 7 to 9 a.m. in the morning, or maximum 9:30. And then in the evening, you have the access again post 7 p.m., post 8 p.m. So you can only use the device for that amount of time. And you cannot send any heavy content, because, for example, this 1 hour of Zoom conversation is going to take anywhere between 800 MB to 2 GB of data. And most of the plans that we analyzed that people were using in the community, were the best of the plans were 1 GB per day or 1.5 GB per day, the geo plans that people get. So the fathers were like, and the mothers like, okay, we're not going to waste the entire plan on the content that you're setting. So we knew that we cannot send videos, we cannot send heavy content. And the other thing was, we also could not make like a very fancy app, which we had, and give it to the parents to download and work on it, because people had like very entry level smartphones. So you cannot give a very heavy app of say 50, 55 MB and be like, okay, you kind of use my content for the day. So then we had to think a lot, okay, what is that, which is the platform which all of them are already on, which was WhatsApp. And thankfully, WhatsApp for Business was getting more accessible to organizations in the country. Just from Book My Show, Go Indigo, we were just trying to find out how these people are using. And then I think then things came together towards April or May, or we were like, okay, the parent only gets the WhatsApp. They don't have to download anything. We will do the heavy lifting on our end. The people in the community who are working for Sarthi also don't have to download an app. We will do the heavy lifting. We will create a web interface, which they just have to go and press a button. And as soon as they press a button, the algorithm calculates which worksheet Sudha is going to get, which worksheet Jayesh is going to get. And then it does the heavy lifting will be done by the algorithm and by the machines. And the softer aspect, which is to build that trust with the mother, to force the mother, you have to send it by end of the day, or you're doing like an injustice to your child, to play that card of trust and relationship. Those things were being done by the community workers. And that kind of helped us scale as well. Like, we didn't have to wait for 6 months to 1 year to actually train a community worker. We could just get someone, train them on how to use that app, and just test whether they were good in those humane skills of getting the mothers onto the track. And I think that was the reason I think initially we were struggling a lot with response rate, but slowly we were seeing response rates up to 90-95%, which is highest amongst the tech industry, for profit, non-profit. And recently the impact data is also somewhat promising. We are looking at doing more so we were lucky enough to do like a round of in-person proctor tests when the cases were low. Around the November to March cycle. So I think that kind of told us what is actually happening on the ground, whether my data coming from online test is matching the proctor test happening on the ground. So we are seeing 85% accuracy in the data, which is also somewhat helpful.
Yes.
So all this data was not available for me for the last year because it was very difficult to kind of go on the ground and collect all of it. But I think with tech, the parents are also forced to send the data like that. We were forced to work like this. The field workers were forced to do it.
Absolutely.
So that's also helping in the
this is what relates to what Sudha was saying, how people have taken this as an opportunity this last 15 months and, kind of innovated and been on their toes to turn things around and pivot things around. But I think I'll move back to Sudha at that point. In terms of from here on, Sudha, what is the strategy or approach to scale up? It's always been a challenge, right, to ensure that the quality and the systems and the processes. But what is it? What do you see? So there are key challenges here on for the scale up of the impact that you are catalyzing.
So there's good news and bad news. Let's start with the bad news, which is the extreme squeeze on the availability of philanthropic capital. Right? So much of it has kind of gone to the here and now immediate problems, that it's kind of taken away the long-term support for 5-year, 10-year horizon problems, which are important problems for the country. I do worry about that. And I think there's a lot of work to do to create and build back the venture philanthropy ecosystem that is very thoughtful about how best to deploy now a scarce resource, that's philanthropic capital, for maximized gains. The good news is the talent has come, and I think talent unlocks a lot of levers required for change making at large scale. Government partnerships being the most important one. I think with the emergence of the new breed of nonprofits that are thinking systems change, that are thinking sustainable problem solving, the barriers that have historically existed with the NGO sector, right, in terms of not having a baseline of trust and collaboration historically, I think will change for the better in a very predictable way. A lot of governments are seeking out and appreciating the contributions that nonprofits have made right through this pandemic in arresting the downward spiral and preventing second order problems, containing them in the immediate first order problems. It's a trend that should continue, and I think goodness will come out of it. That was to your point on how will we achieve scale. The short answer is yes, through government collaborations. Can't hear?
Sudhanshu, can you please unmute Jayesh? He's unable to unmute himself.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Sorry, I had to ramble on for you to come back.
Yes, I was, technology again comes to, not always to your rescue. But yeah, I mean, absolutely, in terms of how do we engage with that. Very quickly, same question to you, Emily, and then Ankit, we have a minute each. I've just been prompted, and then we go to the question and answers from the participants.
Great. Scaling is an interesting thing. When I was first starting this startup, I thought there'd be a point as you grow a company where things would get boring and kind of plateau because you've already figured it out. Then you just redo it. But one of my wise advisors has a saying that says, bigger is different. It's that if you're cooking dinner for 5 people, you can't cook the same way for 50 or 500, just do more of it. It's completely different process. And so when we look at sanitation, and you're focusing on maybe community or city scale, it's going to look quite different when you're replicating to, goodness, the mega cities of the world or countrywide, and how does that replicate? And so as Sanovation, just in short, as we look to our future, it's really working with our government partners, really understanding our systems now and how they'll change at scale. And then how do you create something that's replicable that we can expand outside of Kenya, hopefully to India someday, but isn't going to fail in the way that many solutions, when you copy paste, it's different. And so I think there's just a lot of learning in our future. It's been exciting. We're happy to do it, and I do hope I can get to India soon. I would love to be part of the sanitation movement right there.
Yeah, soon. I hope so. Over to you, Ankit. A minute for you. How do you really look at scaling your initiatives up?
I think one of the things is to identify the right unit of replication. And I think for the last couple of years, we had been looking at the wrong unit. We thought household was the right unit to replicate or to scale. But recently, we have realized that community as a whole, like one low-income particular community, one urban poor community, is the right unit. And we have to understand that nobody from outside can come and work in the communities. That's not sustainable. So we have to empower people within the community to rise up to the occasion, empower them with the right tech, right SOPs, processes, and then kind of copy paste that unit across the city, across multiple districts. Mm-hmm. And the other thing is like very important are partnerships. So I think someone has also asked a question about the tribal education, and I'll answer it there. We partnered with a very interesting org which works with tribal education, and they kind of picked up our entire thing and tried to copy paste it there, and it was like very positive results. Kind of had to stop it down for capital reasons, but I think just the right partnerships with the right community-based organizations, and then just taking the entire model, contextualizing it, and spreading it right there.
I'm not surprised you're saying that we would work, unlike Sudha and Emily, that we would have to work closely with the public system. You're keeping that away and at bay. So at that point, I'll over to you, Soumya. If you could really look at some of the questions and pertinent ones in the time that's available.
Thank you, Jayesh. Thank you, everyone. So there's some very interesting questions for Emily, Ankit, Sudha. So really to Ankit, what aspects of mental health support do you see the need? Do you see the need for being addressed the most in the coming months, given the current state of pandemic in India? And also, do you see EduTech replacing a good portion of primary, secondary schooling post-pandemic? How can we balance that with the social development skills kids learn in a physical school environment?
Right. I think this entire pandemic has given us a very good chance to go back and really look at how the education was actually happening inside the classrooms. As I was telling people, our children are not being taught at the right level and the right pace. There is no quick feedback loop. A lot of emphasis is on the examination and not on the mastery. So I think this gives us a chance to take a step back and change all of those things. Be taught at the right level, be taught at the right pace, given the feedback daily, and also given the opportunity to master the skills and not just show after 6 months that I know the skill, something like that. So I think EdTech won't replace the entire primary or secondary education piece, but I think it will become a really, really big part of it. Even a teacher inside the classroom, it's impossible for a teacher to kind of grade 40 worksheets every day and give that feedback to the children that, hey, Jayesh has progressed, Sudha hasn't, Emily needs to do 10 more questions to be there, Ankit needs to do 20 more questions to be there, and like kind of teach us at all at the different levels. Say subtraction to Emily, multiplication to Sudha. So that's not possible. It's inhumane to expect that out of a teacher. So EdTech will come and kind of aid all of these things, and we should take this opportunity to realize, okay, these are the problems we need to solve in the classrooms, and we need to help the teacher a lot with it. So kind of amplify it with giving them the right tech. In terms of the mental health thing, I think it's very curious. So, and the other point is that, yes, of course, students do need that peer communication to build those social skills. And hopefully whenever the schools open up and it's safe for the children to go back and interact with each other, I think that's a very natural skill that comes to children. They don't need to push themselves to go out and kind of express themselves. Definitely they'll need like a hand-holding process there. In terms of other mental health, I think mothers in our communities and our program, and especially the women inside the communities, need a lot of mental health support, which we haven't been able to provide. I think BDAP being at home, the husbands are also now at home. It has created this like very weird situation which we haven't also been able to understand. So I think that's one more thing where I could see mental health organizations coming in and supporting the women in the community, especially just finding that social capital back again.
Thank you, Ankit. The next question is for Emily, but I would like Jayesh to also weigh in here. So the question is, you work in low resource settings. So how do you design your tech so it fits the context? Do you think your collaborative approach has helped you achieve more results? And do you think it has allowed for some resilience in the current time? So would love to hear both Emily and Jayesh's view on this. Sudhanshu, I would request you to unmute Emily and Jayesh, please.
There we go. Wonderful. Great. So in low resource settings, technology needs to be robust enough and able to be fixed and maintained in local settings. And I think the number one things people say when they come to our waste to energy treatment plants is they go, wow, this isn't that complicated. And I'm really, really proud of that response. It means that we've simplified the technology down to enough that something that you can replicate anywhere in the world. You know, and up to a very recent time, 100% of our equipment had all been built and sourced just here in Kenya. And that's really exciting. And as we scale, we've had to pull a little bit from outside of Kenya, but that's the level that we're operating in. And so I think it is really important to think about that with your technology. You know, they talk about black box technology. Is if when someone can't open it and figure it out, then it's going to be difficult. I think to your point of collaboration is also key, that, you know, we've got to pull in all the voices of people around us. And when you do that, you're going to create a solution that is context specific. And I think with sanitation, that is so personal to people that there is very specific solutions. So for instance, the toilets and technology that we use here in Kenya may not work in India. You know, there's a lot more washing rather than wiping that happens in India. And these are the pieces and collaboration that very much when we look to scale in other new areas, it's about getting the local partners on board to help understand what is that context and what's going to work there.
Brilliant. I'll just briefly add on to, you know, completely agree with Emily in terms of the technology, but it is very surprising in terms of what, if the right technology is available, what different uses people really put it to. And, you know, it just opens up unintended benefits that we've seen how people have deployed whatever new technology that you've really looked at. And I think it's a basic feature of a technology that if it is simple and can be understood, you know, that wow factor Emily talked about, that they can then really look at in terms of emulating that, modifying that, and see how best it is put to their use. So I'll stop here, Sonia.
Thank you, Jayesh. So there's a question for you. So there is an organization working in the agri sector. So, and it's a not-for-profit. How would they be eligible under Nudge Startup? This is the question. They're into reducing chemical farming and promoting natural integrated farming.
That's such an important problem. And I think increasingly all businesses should be looking at that triple bottom line, right? To be financially viable, of course, but also to have social and environmental returns. You know, we're no longer in the pre-pandemic era of where, you know, it was okay to only focus on one. Agri is an important focus area for us. We are running an agri challenge to find the most farmer-centric innovations that will scale to 10 million lives touched, right, in the small and marginal segment. But I guess it's a little too late for them to apply to it. It's well underway, and you know, the top 25 contestants there have, you know, started the process of implementing their solutions on the ground. But every few months, we do open up both our incubator and accelerator programs. Very interested in nonprofit startups at an idea stage in the incubator that should come up sometime in the July-August timeframe. We are currently open for applications to our accelerator, which is for organizations that are sorted on their basic model and are now looking to scale up, where there's enough evidence of the fact that your idea is worth scaling up. And then we kind of offer the support system to actually achieve that scale. Applications are open, and you can go to our website, csi.thenudge.org. I'll put it in the chat. We'd love to meet you. Yeah.
Thank you, Sudha. Thank you. Question to Ankit and Emily. So there's a question on how do you report achievements in sustainability as well as financial achievements in sustainability of your work? Do you keep it separate? Sudhanshu, can you please unmute Emily and Ankit?
There we go. I'll just stop muting myself. It'll make it easier. So how do we report on our sustainability numbers? You know, this is key, especially most social enterprises. Sanovation is one of those where we want to have equal focus on the financial model as well on the social benefits. And that balance is something often difficult to strike, that in between. I do believe it's the sustainable finances that is going to keep us growing and keep it operating. That's important. On the social side, sanitation's an interesting one because there's been quite a few big studies to try to directly link improved sanitation to health and environmental benefits. And the problem is there's so many confounding issues that it's hard to actually draw a direct link. Some of the things that we talk about then is just looking at tons of waste that we remove from the community. We try to look at diarrheal disease as a whole in the city and if that's being reduced. Because we're converting our feces into a fuel that substitutes firewood, then we look a lot at carbon dioxide reduction from not cutting down trees and just number of tree stays here in Kenya. So those are some of our biggest metrics we report on.
I think like a good way to answer with that would be from Sathi's perspective is to first of all define the 2 or 3 very, very true north kind of a metrics that you want to report on. So for example, at Sathi, it's DRR, SPW, daily response rate, she's progress per week, learning mastery achieved, etc. So these are the 3 metrics. When you define them, then you eat, sleep, pray, everything with these 3 metrics, whatever happens. And then what happens is like, then you start thinking about sustainability. So at Sathi, we look at sustainability from 3 angles. The first is financial sustainability, operational sustainability, and impact sustainability, which means that if I try to scale my program from say 50 people to 500 to 5,000, do these 3 metrics, which I defined early on in the program, how much do they change? If I'm moving from say 1,000 people to 10,000 people tomorrow, is my DRR dipping too much? Is my SPW going away to a point that it doesn't even make sense to scale that much? So then you have to come back and see whether your operations are in that limit or not. Similarly, for financial sustainability, if you start charging, of course, parents have a different perceived value of the actual impact. So you try to meet that, but are your metrics actually changing during that? Is your daily response rate going way too low when you're trying to satisfy the parents so that they just pay to you? So you just think of that. And similarly for impact sustainability, that even if you exit after 1-2 years, have you created those long-term structures inside the community, inside the household of that, inside the mind of the mother, that she'll continue to work with the child throughout the life. The child is self-independent, self-dependent for the rest of the life. While you slowly exit, your impact continues to be there.
Right. Thank you, Ankit. Thank you, Emily. Ankit, there's actually one question for you. My son just tells me his teacher is scary and strict, and that's no progress in understanding math, especially. How would you respond to this?
I would say just take it in your hands. I mean, if you are a mother, if you're a father, you have the entire capability to do so. Just send me an email or text. I'll maybe enroll you into Sarthi's program. It's as good for a high-income family as it is for a low-income family. A lot of my nieces and nephews are doing it and are actually struggling to keep up. But I think you have to create that environment at home where the child sits down for 30 minutes. You build that persistence over and over the weeks, that no matter what happens, you have to sit down for 30 minutes. You have to attempt those questions. And even if they are wrong, you go back and correct them. There's no examination as such. So these are a few things you could do at home, and maybe just ask him to bunk the math classes.
Right. Thank you, Ankit. So I think there's only one question. I think we're over 10 minutes, but if we could just take the last question on what is the best thing we could do to overcome a future pandemic crisis like we are facing right now? The person specifically has asked about healthcare, but it's open to anyone who wants to take this up and attempt answering this.
I mean, I can go first. Working in the world of sanitation is essential in keeping people healthy, especially people who are using shared water access, shared toilet access, or lack of clean water to wash their hands, lack of soap. These are all key issues in the wash sector. So if we look at preventing future pandemics, then we can all improve both the household and city level in how we're dealing with our waste and with our water.
I think I'll just add on to that is in terms of how best are we able to improve our communication at all levels. I think bulk of the work and issues that we've really seen run on the system could have been better managed with absolutely better communication and understanding about responses from people in panic. I think there is enough science and enough technology to help us really be very, very effective in terms of how we communicate publicly and personally, of course, as we move forward.
Thank you, Jayesh. We've reached the end of the panel discussion. Thank you very much for joining. We have a very short video we'd like to play before we close the panel. Manish, can we have the video, please? Thank you so much. Jayesh, do you want to say, provide
Yes.
your closing remarks, please?
Yes, I think one thing that I'm surely looking forward to as part of this end of this pandemic is the opportunity to see these three stalwarts in person, get to understand what triggers them and getting them to work every morning, and see how best we can collaborate, whether in terms of the scale up, whether in terms of monitoring systems, or whether in terms of blended financing. This is a few things that we do very well. As we move forward, but at a personal level, I do look forward to meeting all of you as soon as possible. Thank you so much for your time and in engaging with us today. And we do hope that this would be a start of a collaborative future, technology enabled and in person as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jayesh. That's a perfect way to end this webinar, collaboration. It was really interesting to learn. I think there were a lot of interesting takeaways for the audience and for me personally as well. It was interesting to learn how technology is being used in various sectors. Thank you, Ankit, Emily, for sharing, as well as Sudha, to implement innovative solutions, sort of create accessibility, create collaboration that is context specific, helping us use resource efficiently, and most importantly, technology has to cut across all spheres and be part of the entire solution, and it's not the only solution for inclusive growth. So thank you to each and everyone who took time out to be part of this conversation. You can download the Aavishkaar Group Impact Report 2020 from aavishkaargroup.com website. We hope you enjoyed the session. Thank you very much to all the speakers again.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye.